So if you own your own business or you're starting your own business, when should you use contracts? I think there are a lot of circumstances or situations where you should use a contract, and a lot of times people don't use them when they really should, and that can result in problems for them in the future if there's any type of conflict or misunderstanding or miscommunication. So a contract is a very important tool that you should be using if you own a business. Now, for starters, when should you have a contract? I think one good example to start with would be rental agreements. I think a lot of people own investment properties and they don't have a rental agreement contract with the person that's renting, or if they're the ones renting, they often don't have a contract. And in my opinion, that's a really bad idea. You want to get clear about what's included in that agreement and have that documented for both parties. So in the case of business, are you renting some office space? Are you leasing some commercial space? I think it's really important in a case like that to have a formal contract, a rental contract or a lease contract in place. So typically that should be the property owner or the landlord's responsibility to generate that contract, and then have the individual or the company that is signing the lease or the rental agreement to then sign it and get their own copy as well. And again, that's just to protect both parties. So that would be one important situation to use a contract in business. Another one would be for ownership. So whether you are incorporating or just having a partnership with multiple owners, either way, regardless of the legal structure of your business, if you have multiple owners, it's a good idea to have ownership contracts just to determine who owns what, how much of the business do they own, how much money are they putting in, what happens if one of them wants to leave, what are some bylaws, or what happens in cases of misconduct or things like that. There's a lot that could go into those contracts, and I think it's really important to have those in cases where you have multiple owners of a business. I think a lot of times things can get kind of messy when there's multiple owners in a business. So having that formal documented contract is a good way to mitigate problems and then have something to refer back to when there is conflict or misunderstanding or things like that. Another example of when you'll probably want to use a contract as a business owner would be if you're doing bigger projects. So think, for example, if you are a general contractor, you're doing construction, you're building someone's garage, you're building a house, for a bigger ticket item like that, where it's not just $300 or even $3,000, if it's $30,000 or $300,000, you're probably going to want to have a contract with the client, maybe even a contract with some of your subcontractors that are doing some of the work for you. I would say, if it's worth, depends on your threshold, but if it's in the thousands of dollars, you're probably going to want something written down. Whereas if it's just a $250 job, maybe not worth it to have a contract. Depends on, your preference, the nature of the business, the region, and things like that. But in, doing bigger projects for clients, I think it's a good idea to have some type of formal contract, or at least documentation where you are clear about the terms of the project. And now another example where you'll probably want a contract is for employees, if you are going to have employees. What is the employment term? Do they have some type of probation? What is their compensation? What happens if they do something wrong? What happens if they miss work? When do they get a raise? There's tons of things you could include in an employment contract, but in the very least, I think it's good to have something simple. Again, this is for the protection of both parties. So, both benefit from it, and it's just a good way to get really clear about what is being agreed upon, so that both parties are clear about what their expectations are and what they are supposed to provide, and what happens if they don't uphold their side of the contract. And then just last point to add, when I say contract, I don't necessarily mean you need like a 20-page contract and you need to go to a lawyer and pay, $1,000 or more to have this contract written up and reviewed. Depends on the circumstances. I would say the bigger the project or the more important the agreement, the more necessary it is to have a really nicely written, clearly written formal contract that might be written by a lawyer, or at least someone who's good at writing contracts, and reviewed by someone who is, qualified to do so. Whereas if it's just something really minor, you might be able to find a template online and just adjust it to suit you. So it really depends, but something that probably is not taken seriously enough, and then it ends up burning people. So just something to be mindful and something to implement in the right circumstances and in the right format. So hopefully that was helpful. If you enjoyed the video, you can just click like and check out the other videos on my channel. And if you have a question, feel free to just leave that in the comment section and I'll address it there, or maybe make a new video on it.